Hi, everyone. Nate here. Just a quick heads up that if you enjoy What a Hell of a Way to Die, you can access bonus content in which we publish a new episode every week on our Patreon. The link is in the show notes, and for $5 a month, you get access to all the bonus content we've put out since we started the show back in 2016. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me, it is Nate, it is a post-Trump world, a post-presidential Trump world. We've done it. We can all go back to brunch now. COVID is gone. Although since Biden has been elected, like 4,000 people have died of COVID. So far, not doing so well. But you know, it's day one. We'll see. Nate,
I did see some people here in the UK say that it is kind of insane that the president loses and then has 3 months basically to just fuck around before he, turns over the engine of power to the person who's beaten him. And it's like, yeah, it is here. It's literally like the day after.
Yeah, in America, it's so weird because like you say to somebody, it's like, well, why is it that it takes so long between November and going into January? It's like, well, in the 1700s, it took a month for like the winter to ride a horse. Like, okay, but it's 2021. You take an airplane or you jump on it.
Yeah, well, literally, the reason why the certification of the elections is in early January is because it used to take that long to fucking count all the ballots, to get them places and then to count them. Like
we've counted these ballots like 3 times in as much time. It's just like it's the same thing as like, why do we have the votes on Tuesday? It's like, well, when farmers needed to come in to vote, like, okay, but we don't do that. Like, we don't. This isn't in Afghanistan when I was there in 2004. They put ballots on the back of donkeys and sent them up mountains to people and brought them back. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. It's hard to get to these places, but this is America. There is no place in America that you can't get to in 24 hours. Like whether airplane or car or something,
helicopter, car. I mean, there are places in America
Alaska.
where they not just Alaska. There's a place in northern Arizona where the mail is delivered by donkey because it's so remote. But I mean, it's not like you couldn't travel to those places by helicopter if you'd used a helicopter in the 1700s. People would say, what hath God wrought? What is this demonry? So, it's a very different world. I mean, I'm reminded, and I hate constantly invoking old Twitter posts that were successful, but I mean, sometimes they're just such trenchant observations. And one of them from around, let's say 2015, 2016 was the founding fathers who barely ever washed their dicks would have wanted me to have this AR-15 in a Wendy's.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. It's like we love to do this veneration of the U.S. system, of our Constitution, of how smart the founders were. It's always so full of platitudes and so patronizing. But the fact is, there are things that you could do to make the system work better, and we simply refuse. And as long as that continues to exist, you just aren't going to be able to make progress and get over the insane problems America has. And so lots of folks have died and COVID's gotten way worse since Biden was elected because Trump's still been in power and they've just been fucking around. And now Biden has finally taken over. He's done some executive orders. There's some good stuff. There's some bad stuff. It looks like they're kind of hedging on ICE and on the border camps. Big surprise.
Yeah.
It also looks like they're going to try for legislation that's going to grant amnesty or let people who are undocumented apply for citizenship. Who knows if that'll pass, but it's at least a thing. They're setting their sights on that. They've done some executive orders about trans rights. I haven't dug into the weeds that much on them, but the TERFs are furious, and so that means it's a good thing. So, there's a lot going on, but it's weird because I absolutely said anyone but Biden on the Democratic side. Obviously, I didn't want Trump. And like once Biden's a nominee, it's just like, well, fuck. Obviously, he's better. Biden's better than Trump. But I am kind of, cautiously surprised in a good way, maybe, that they haven't immediately tacked right But I don't believe it's going to hold, and I don't trust them any further than I can throw them, having lived through this with Clinton as a kid, with Obama as a young adult, and now, this iteration. But I will say that they at least seem to not be trying to immediately pivot to the right and do stupid wonk nudge shit. Like, it's actually looking better.
They didn't come in with austerity politics off the bat. They're not. Yeah, while the right is going back to what about the deficit? The old canard that they had back when Obama was in charge is like, what about our debt? So things, and look, it's been at time of recording, it has not even been 24 hours. So, but it is also nice to not have a man whose brain literally doesn't work correctly, like who just like like when if you're a car person, like when you have like one piston that's off, or you got one spark plug that's not firing, it just fucks with the whole engine and it feels weird. That's like the entirety of Trump's brain, and so you know what? Look, Biden's got some gaffes too. That man also cannot speak, but I also don't think that he's going to like ramble on about hating sharks. Or
yeah, and he's not going to. I don't think he's going to tell people to inject bleach. I
take aquarium cleaning drugs, or or beef with Coca-Cola.
I think Biden, for all of his insane faults, for all of the fact that the sort of like call it liberal political sphere basically decided to throw Me Too in the garbage when they nominated Biden, for all of that, Biden has never tweeted Happy 9/11 to all the haters and losers.
But he should. He absolutely should.
Biden has never complained about Sissy Graydon Carter's bad food restaurants and his Vanity Fair Christmas party, which is no longer, quotes, hot. It's all this stuff. Trump was uniquely Americanly insane.
He really was. Like, I've never felt more of a cross section of America. Like, it's the you've got everything from the rich asshole elitist who is Trump, who has degrees from colleges that in a normal world he would have never gotten into, but he's rich. But also he is like the crass, like, Jefferson County fucking dumbass who is just loud and fat and has a big truck and has really stupid opinions and yells them all the time because he's just like a white business owner, and therefore nobody's ever told him that his opinions are shit. So he is really like, we've had so many like people that embody the American spirit, but like we haven't had one who's really embodied the absolute garbage trash of America, and we finally have, and now we know how that works, and the answer is not well.
Yeah, I said this the other day talking about Britain, but also I feel like there's a couple of ways in which it's relevant. So I lived in Alaska in 2008. I moved up there early 2008. I moved up there to join my first unit once I got out of training, and in August of 2008, John McCain selected Sarah Palin to be his vice presidential nominee. She was the Alaska governor. And around that time, once Palin became a spotlight figure, news media came up to Alaska, specifically up to the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, where she's from. She's from Wasilla. I mean, she's not originally from there, but she, basically grew up there. She moved there, I think, as like a teenager. And she was, by that point, I mean, she was uniquely white Alaskan. And all the news was focusing on how fucking insane Alaska is. Like, just how bonkers crazy people are and how fucked up everything is, and just like the poverty and the extremity and the incredible bad weather and how expensive and wild and racist and just completely fucking batshit Alaska is. And in a way, I was really grateful. I mean, obviously, I didn't want Vice President, Palin to ever be a thing. God forbid. And I think it was proven by how insane she's gone, just how much of a nutbag she was to begin with. But it was at least relieving to be able to point to that coverage and be like, I'm not crazy and it's not sour grapes on my part. This is literally how nuts this place is. And in the same way, I feel like I'm not saying I liked Trump. I hated Trump. I was just talking to my wife about this yesterday. The sheer, like, the last 4 years has taken how many fucking years off our lives from stress? Like, it sucked. Fuck that guy. Fuck him. I hope he dies immediately. But, you know, I will say that in the experience having happened, it was at least a revelation to people who had weird fucking notions, to some people who had weird notions about what America is, was, whatever, that like, no, this is America. This is who the American system allowed to become president. This fucking joker.
And celebrated.
Like,
and, you know.
So, yeah, it said 75 million people fucking voted for re-election after all the shit. After all the fucking just nightmare shit that he did. You know,
like he should have not been just for like the weird shit that he said. Like I said, you know, as you mentioned earlier, the sharks not wanting to give money to sharks.
Yeah, he going on this tirade about taking the oil, and then it turns into like, you know, I just don't like sharks. They call me. They ask donations. Save the sharks. I don't want to save the sharks, folks. Like
there was also one time when he said Mexicans wouldn't work for the local milk people. Like dairy farmers. Let's not forget him staring directly at an eclipse multiple times. He said that the J in Donald J. Trump stood for genius. Like any other like normal country would have, like, you know, if this was like an ancient civilization, like we're a Mayan civilization, we would have like shoved that dude off to sea a long time ago. Like this guy's brain can no longer function. He's bringing down the rest of us, so let's just push him out into the ocean and let the sharks figure it out.
Yeah, there's a friend of the show, well, maybe friend of the show. One of my Twitter mutuals, Mark at Kept Simple, had a big thread on Trump moments, and one of them, because I did completely, this one passed me by, was a Guardian article from I want to say 2020, but it was reporting like early Trump stuff when Rinse Penis, when Ryan's Priebus, who was called Rinse Penis like 1,000 times by Roger Stone on Twitter before his account got banned, was briefing Trump, and Trump would constantly interrupt him to ask questions about badgers for some reason. Are they mean to people? Trump reportedly asked Priebus, perhaps thinking of badgers' very long claws, which they use to dig burrows that they make their home. Or are they friendly creatures?
I like when he was telling a 7-year-old that Santa Claus didn't exist.
Yeah, he's like, if you believe Santa Claus at age 7, that's kind of marginal, isn't it?
Like truly, and first off, we've had plenty of presidents who have, you know, tweeted, but we've never had a president that posted until we had Donald Trump. We've never had a man like post through it and also be in charge of things. Kofifi hamburgers, like
I didn't know about the local milk people. I'm just gonna read
Mars, of which the moon is a part. Like, come on. Like, and this
Forgot
is the thing,
about that one.
Over 4 years, like it's hard to, like, because we were always jumping from one thing to the next. There was always one horror to the next. But like when you take like 7 minutes, and Nate, post this, you know, this thread in the show notes so people can go through it. It's absolutely insane that we allowed this to happen and that nobody did anything about it. Like that everybody's just like, yeah, this is fine. This is fine. A man who said the moon is a part of Mars. That's a normal thing. We should have that person in charge of things here.
I mean, when he said that Seoul was too close to the North Korean border and people just needed to
move Seoul? A city of 30 million people. Just move it south a little bit.
Move it south. Yeah. God, I think the thing about Trump that gets me, like, all right, being in the truck and just fucking rocking out like a little kid. That's a Trump moment that I remember.
Yelling at the kid mowing the lawn.
When he struggled to get into Air Force One with his umbrella because it kept getting stuck in the doorway. I found one from the thread. Trump introduces West Virginia governor as the largest, most beautiful man.
I like that he argues with Vietnam veterans about Apocalypse Now, the movie, a lot. It was napalm. Okay, so yeah. So he misquoted the "I love the smell of napalm in the morning" and thought it was about Agent Orange, and then they were like, "No, the line is I love the smell of napalm," and he's just like, "Well, I just think you didn't like the movie." Because he can't even be incorrect. Like he has to, and these are Vietnam veterans, and whatever you think about them, arguing about Apocalypse Now, about a line, about one of the most famous lines in Apocalypse Now, and being incorrect about it, and fucking going forward, just absolute, just God, the brain on demand. Like I can't wait until somebody can crack his skull open and study what's going on in there. Like, what do you think they're gonna find? Like, just a bowl of tapioca pudding or something?
I want to say this was it 2017 or 2018? It was something to do with protests where because the right started freaking out about Antifa pretty early, but post Charlottesville when they were confronted. Well, no, actually, it wasn't even post Charlottesville. It was post Richard Spencer getting punched. Like him getting humiliated, that really made all of a sudden weird how all of a sudden Antifa became a huge concern of the right once one of like the right's most popular figures in terms of media coverage got humiliated. But Trump was basically talking about like maybe it was the during the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer, but he's talking about soup. Remember the soup cans?
Oh God, yeah, throwing soup
they
cans.
They have cans of soup. And they throw the cans of soup. That's better than a brick because you can't throw a brick. It's too heavy. But a can of soup, you can really put some power in that, right? And when they get caught, they say, "No, this is soup for my family. They're so innocent. This is soup for my family."
My starving family needs this soup that I'm definitely not going to use as a projectile. Oh God, I forgot about the orb, the fucking Saudi Arabian orb.
Oh God, the fucking orb. I forgot about so much of this stuff. Or like, I mean, to me, nothing I think will ever top the happiness on Trump's face when during the shutdown he hosted. Was it like the NCAA champions or the Super Bowl winners or whomever? It was a football team, and they couldn't get a banquet spread or a food spread catered because of the government shutdown. So they just bought like $2,000 worth of McDonald's. And Trump is just lording over this McDonald's with this huge smile on his face, like in like the White House state dining room or whatever the fuck,
with a portrait of Abraham Lincoln staring down on him. And like, well, American history and American exceptionalism is all bullshit. At the same time, like when all these people, when all the chuds, bang on about the founding fathers and the presidents that came before us, and just like this man put out a spread of cold McDonald's for a basketball team, of which half didn't show up because he's a huge racist. Like, I don't believe America will exist as a country currently, as we know it now within the next 100 years, and this is pretty much why. And I think that's fine as long as we can do it, with less violence. But who knows? Because we've also got people who are saying that we need to balkanize. So
yeah, Jesse Kelly, the fucking cool veteran dude, ready to fucking do veteran shit by balkanizing.
by literally doing another secession. Ooh, here's one. Trump addresses Hurricane Harvey victims in Corpus Christi. Quote: "What a crowd! What a turnout!" End quote.
Then he throw paper towel rolls at them too?
That was in Puerto Rico. That was a different hurricane that he fucked up.
Oh, or another one about the hurricane. Remember when the hurricane, was it Hurricane Dorian, I think? Was the one where like the map said it wasn't going to hit Alabama, but he said it was, and so like he drew the map the hurricane trajectory extending into Alabama just so he could say he was right.
God, man, what are we going to podcast about from now on? We don't have this fucking buffoon anymore. We're kidding. There's plenty of dipshittery going on, but and this is just the beginning of it. But God, the weird way he shakes hands, like grabbing people's fists. What the fuck is wrong with this man?
The weird way he stands, like the super wide power stance that makes, or like leans forward, but also in a power stance,
or leans backwards. Like when you he sometimes has that like action figure stance where like you have to lean them back a little bit at the hips so their chest is back, but their hips are forward because that's the only way you can get the action figure to stand up properly. That's a Donald Trump stance, and all of them do that. Like it's just a big family of people who cannot stand normally, and I don't know why. Like, lean against something, for God's sake.
You know what gets me, too? I was just thinking about this. We haven't talked about, a couple of things. We haven't talked about the whole MarALago thing. Like, that was more angry than fun. Like, the sheer volume of corruption that was happening. Like, the VA is now being run by like a guy who donated to his golf club.
Right.
A
couple of his golf buddies.
State secrets are being fucking disseminated at the golf club. You know, like all this crazy shit.
When they were at Trump and Abe Shinzo, the prime minister.
Shinzo Abe. I mean,
Shinzo
Abe. Abe Shinzo is how you'd say it if he were Japanese, but his surname is Abe. Yeah.
Good old Abe. Abe. When they were at MarALago having dinner, and North Korea shot a missile in like their general direction, and so they all just like popped open their phones at the table, like at MarALago, in the middle of in the middle of like people having dinner, and just like let's start hashing this out now. It's like, will you get to some place? And like people taking pictures, like, ooh, here's the president and the prime minister of Japan, while we're at dinner. Oh, the seat of power here. It's so great. It's like, this poor man is having his country shot at right now. What the fuck are we doing?
I remember seeing a video that got made into a GIF of him and Shinzo Abe shaking hands. And then when he finally released his death grip on Shinzo Abe's hand, you could see the exasperation and relief on his face. Like, who the fuck is this big child? I mean, I was thinking about, let's think, the weird power stance we talked about already.
The way that he dumped fish food when he was with, he just upended the thing of fish food into the, and like that was, the thing is that whole thing was perfectly normal, like because the prime minister of Japan was like, yeah, that's fun too, we can just dump it all in there. But like, just the look of this giant man baby dumping a box of fish food with his face, I don't know, man, just... He can't do anything right, and there's a reason for that.
The thing that gets me is, I'm not gonna lie, man, I could not figure out what the deal was with YMCA and why they decided to just like have him dancing to YMCA in all his videos, like why that became such a rallying cry. And I saw a post from one of my mutuals who said, well, in light of Donald Trump having danced away his heartache and completely ruined his life to bad disco, we can safely say goodbye to our first twink president. It's like, Jesus Christ. I just don't get it, man.
I think it's just because white people really love like music that has dance moves already like built into it.
That's true, yeah. Like
the electric slide,
the Macarena.
Yeah, the cha-cha slide, the Macarena, the Cupid shuffle, like anything that has like here's the dance moves to this song here. Like cha-cha slide is literally, the song is how to dance to it. And so the YMCA, man, that's like the first one. It's YMCA. You do the hand motions and everything, and then you just kind of dance back and forth, and then you do YMCA. It's just it's a way to smooth over the white person's brain to just like, here it is, popular music that I can dance to because this is how everybody looks awkward dancing to the electric slide. So, well, actually, no, the electric slide you do have to have a little bit of rhythm for, but YMCA, any dipshit can do.
It would be very interesting to me to hear Trump try to pronounce Dale a tu cuerpo alegría Macarena. So, maybe we can get him to try, and when he runs again, because he's going to. He's going to try to do something more. You don't think so?
Nah, I think he's done. I think even Melania is just going to be like, don't fucking drag me back into that stupid shit. Like,
it was hilarious watching how fucking fed up she was yesterday.
She changed on the airplane and just like came out as like, I'm Florida Melania now, and I'm fucking done. I'm getting into the SUV and I'm fucking
What
off.
was the deal? Like, Melania is a whole other thing too. Like, the shit that went nowhere. Like, she didn't do really any, like her first lady sort of initiative was cyberbullying, but like nothing happened.
The Be Best campaign, but like her husband was constantly like online and mad,
just bullying people online. Yeah, she would decorate the White House for Christmas in what I would best describe as like the waiting room of goth Soul Cycle. Like, it was really fucked up, just strange. Or like when she showed up to something with that jacket that was like painted, "Do I look like I care?" on the back of it.
I don't care, do you, or something.
Yeah. That was it. Yeah.
Well, let's also not sleep on our vice president who glared at North Korea for who went to the DMZ in South Korea, stood in front of a 4-star general. Like, just watching this man who has like had a very Distinguished military career, and this dude that looks like fucking Kyle Cotton Hill from King of the Hill, arms crossed with a patch on his jacket that says Vice President Mike Pence, and he's just glaring. And that was the point. It wasn't even just like, I'm just mad. It's like, okay, I'm going to glare, and then we're going to say that that's me looking tough and glaring at them. You write that down in the newspaper.
Mike Pence was a weird one because, like, he's more
your
sinister.
Guy. Yeah, he's your guy.
I mean, he's not my guy. Fucking
speak on your Indiana people.
What you got to understand about Mike Pence, two things. First of all, Mike Pence got his start in Republican politics in Indiana as a conservative talk show host, the podcasters of the 80s. So Mike Pence was like a conservative gadfly, podcasting, not really because they didn't exist, doing talk radio, starting I think in the late 80s, and eventually got elected to Congress. I think he got elected in the 1994 congressional wave, like the red wave then, but it might have been later. The thing you got to understand about Mike Pence is that Mike Pence won the governorship after Mitch Daniels had been the governor for 2 terms. And Mitch Daniels, Indiana has term limits, and Mitch Daniels was like, he was like a Bush-era conservative, but he was really just sort of like a let's do business and make Indiana a business state conservative. And like Indiana doesn't really have much of a social safety net to speak of. It's a low tax, low services state. Mitch Daniels' big thing was like bringing foreign capital and doing foreign direct investment and doing infrastructure. Like they were into that stuff. And I mean, Indiana hilariously has something equivalent to a balanced budget amendment from, I'm not joking, like the early part of the 19th century because the state went bankrupt building canals. So they had to build like a no canal amendment in the Constitution that makes it really hard for the state of Indiana to run budget deficits, or at least it did up until the point of there being the sort of modern like debt equity system, because they weren't allowed to to be indebted, if I remember, to like foreign countries or to foreign states. So Mitch Daniels runs the state. It's basically like I'm not going to do culture war. I'm just going to do Republican business stuff. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, like there's plenty of cronyism and stupid shit, but it's not like a Texas style thing where, you know, it's like, let's pass, you know, anti-union laws, but also do bathroom bills. Like there is the bathroom bill constituency and the crazies, and Indiana is a really racist and really evangelical state. But like Mitch Daniels was sort of the standard bearer of like, I don't know, the Bush era conservative who was just doing not culture war politics as much as pro-business everything. And that was sort of what Mike Pence was sold as the continuation of. Like, Mike Pence, don't worry about him. Yeah, whatever, you know, he does his crazy evangelical shit, but he's not going to do that. He's going to be like Mitch Daniels. He's going to like make the state keep being this business capital and like the services capital and medical research capital, and, you know, like Indiana, the hub of all these convention centers, you know, with all these, you know, multinationals come for things, and really low cost of living and really highly educated workforce and blah, 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 like all these things that, you know, and instead, what does he do? He just does bathroom bill shit. He literally runs the state into the ground doing culture war shit. He causes the worst AIDS pandemic, like HIV outbreak in post 90s history. Like since they've started coming up with the antiretrovirals and other drug therapy treatments to treat, you know, AIDS symptoms, by cutting the budgets and defunding Planned Parenthood throughout the state of Indiana, which, because Planned Parenthood was the only Medicaid facility that did stuff like STD and HIV testing in places like Scott County, where there's fucking huge opiate problems, people can't get tested anymore. And then so you have a town like Austin, Indiana, which has like, I think like maybe 10,000 people, and 2,500 people in that town have HIV, and there's no medical care. You know what I mean? Like, all this stuff starts going crazy. So like, the thing about Mike Pence is that he's like, he knows how to hit his marks. He knows how to deliver his lines. He's completely insane, and it doesn't matter if if he achieves even the things that he's promised to do, as long as he gets like the stuff to to torment gay people and torment trans people and, do conversion therapy and basically ban public schools and make everything Christian. Like it sounds like hyperbole, but the guy's nuts. Also, he calls his wife mother. He refuses to be in the same room as other women without a chaperone. And he and his wife's first date was feeding ducks together, and he saved the loaf of bread and had it bronzed. Mike Pence is literally like a dark energy Precious Moments figurine that was the vice president.
That is phenomenal. I've never heard about the bronze loaf of bread.
Bronze loaf of bread. Yes, that's very true.
Oh my God, and the to get elected, like, and to specifically, be a person like, people like Dan Crenshaw who constantly is just like, oh, identity politics. It's destroying us. It's killing us. This culture war stuff is killing us. When like literally doing the exact same thing, not understanding what they're complaining about and doing the exact same thing, and like specifically going to harm people. It's like I didn't like Trump as president, but I really didn't want Pence as president. And you know what? I really hope that he kind of shit himself a little bit when he heard a crowd calling for his head. And I kind of hope that he's always scared. I really hope that he is always worried about somebody coming up and getting him from behind until he dies. Because
it's funny to me that he basically did all the batshit stuff that you needed to gain power as like a culture warrior Republican in the 90s and 2000s. But now it's gone so crazy that he basically has become a traitor to them because he didn't let them lynch him.
Yeah, nobody.
Or he didn't literally overthrow the election.
Here's the thing. All these politicians, they don't want a violent revolution. They'll call for a violent revolution. They'll call for, people to get their guns and go wave their guns. But nobody wants like an actual violent revolution because, look, it's going to be uncomfortable. People are going to die. You're not going to get your medications. It's going to be, it's not going to be the comfortable world that they live in right now. So like as soon as there was a possibility of a violent revolution on January 6th, you saw a lot of people suddenly shit themselves.
I mean, even Crenshaw, who made like his weird "I'm a space warrior fighting Antifa" videos, was like, "Stop this bullshit now!" And it's just like, bro, these are your people,
right?
These are your people.
Who said that voting by proxy was a cowardly thing to do, and then immediately voted by proxy after that because he was worried about it. Because he's been beefing with libertarians for fucking years. I know Liberty Hangout loves to shit all over Dan Crenshaw. And yeah, like Dan Crenshaw does all of the culture war stuff, just like what's his name, Duncan Hunter used to do all the weird racist culture war stuff. But as soon as somebody takes them seriously and just like, yeah, maybe I should go and like do something about this. Like, I'm sorry, if you spend years convinced and telling people that somebody's going to take away your freedoms, your guns, they're killing babies, they are spreading disease, they're doing all they're trafficking children. What the fuck are you, like, as a normal human being, what should you do other than get your gun and go kill somebody? And so when somebody actually does that, it's all of a sudden like, well, guys, I didn't actually mean go kill somebody. I was just saying that, maybe Donald Trump should do something about these violent people who are, stealing babies and trafficking them for, I don't know, sending them to sex dungeons at the bottom of Pizza Hut or something like that. It's a lot of your own chickens have come home to roost, and I'm very glad everybody has told these people to fuck off. Very happy that Howley is getting absolutely no support from anywhere. Now he has to go get he got turned down by Simon & Schuster, but picked up by some goofy Republican, like people who published Dinesh D'Souza fucking books, but also their Revelry is a part of Simon & Schuster, so it's just like, no, we can't have our name on it, but we can put the name of our subsidiaries on it and still make a buck off of it. So
yeah,
fuck all of them, but also fuck Josh Hawley, and he'll never. Here's the problem with Hawley: he'll never resign because he's not Greitens. He doesn't have any amount of shame, even though Greitens is also a huge dipshit. But also, he'll never get elected out because by the time this comes back around, by the time election comes back around for him, it's going to be another 4 years, and everybody will have forgotten that he, tried to incite a revolution. And even if he didn't, everybody's going to just be like, well, he's the Republican and Missouri is red, so that's how we go. So that's just, Howley, man, I don't know. Like, I know. I'm sorry I gave you shit about Mike Pence being from Indiana, because God knows Missouri's got its own fucked up house that it's got to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about Indiana is just that my parents were like Reagan Republicans, but they just don't watch TV and they don't really do culture war stuff. I mean, I think they're still Reagan Republicans in terms of like they absolutely believed the whole, the government is the enemy shit while working for the government. So like, yes, cognitive dissonance is there in spades, but my mom even said, because my mom is the weird anomaly of being a Republican voter who was extremely pro-abortion rights. And, one of her friends has a daughter who was, like suffers from mental illness and has an addiction problem, and at one point got pregnant and didn't want to keep the baby, and they went through the process of what one has to do to get an abortion in Indiana, and they were harassed by protesters the whole time. And my mom was horrified by this, and I tried to tell her, I'm like, you do realize that like the people who make it not just legal but encouraged for protesters to do this, those are the people you vote for every year. And she just doesn't believe me. And I'm like, you yourself have even told me that you are horrified by the weird flyers you get from local Republicans in Lawrence County about like, the trans bathroom aliens are coming to make your baby gay kind of shit. I'm like, that's what Republicans are now.
Yeah,
that's who they are now.
They aren't the like. Look, Republicans in the '80s were also shit, but they weren't like they weren't.
They weren't. They were always bad. The thing is, you're right in the sense that they're not what they are now. But they were the same, but the stuff they were going after was different at the time. And so, for example, the stuff that now seems quaint to us or just taken as a given, like you should treat people who have AIDS and not just let them die. Well, that's not what Republicans believed in the 80s. They thought it was funny. Reagan famously laughed about it, that gay people were dying from AIDS. So Republicans were different in the sense that they weren't doing John Birch Society stuff as a party, but they were absolutely fine with encouraging it. They supported the most batshit kinds of like McCarthyite, anti-communist, just wild nonsense. They were more than happy to stoke the sort of idea that like the Rambo movies were factual and that there were like secret camps of POWs and MIAs, that the Vietnamese were controlling or something. They did Iran-Contra, which I mean, to me, sets the stage for stuff like Iraq and everything that's followed. But they weren't yet on the like Obama's turning the frogs gay kind of thing. I do not
it hadn't
believe
taken the weird conspiracy. Like they were cruel on their own. It wasn't conspiracy theory cruel.
But Reaganism was the same. Reaganism and Trumpism are the same. It's just that everyone involved is now dumber. And also, Reaganism happened at a time where you still had basically, my theory on it is that you still had a lot more like comity between Republicans and Democrats, because most of the people who were in Congress at the time were old enough to have been in Congress prior to the civil rights movement and the backlash that generated from insane white people. And also, it was more of a gentleman's club because they were pretty much all dudes and all white and all went to fucking segregated schools when they were kids. And so, with the obvious exception of black congressmen, but like, let's be perfectly honest, most black people who served at the federal level weren't able to get elected until literally like post 1965. Raphael Warnock is the second black senator ever from the old Confederacy, the first Democrat, and the first to get elected directly, not as an incumbent like Tim Scott was. So the Republicans, I feel like the climate was a little bit different. There was less of the whole like, let's block everything because they're doing gay communism, but they were just as bad. So like, don't get me wrong. I'm not excusing my parents. I'm just saying there's a through line from Reaganism to where we are today, but the manifestation was a little bit less crazy. That's my big takeaway. And without Reagan, you don't get Newt Gingrich. Without Newt Gingrich, you don't get George W. Bush and, the Rumsfeld, Cheney, Wolfowitz sort of the whole like, let's win the 2004 election by saying that, the guy with multiple Purple Hearts is a lying pussy and also that we're going to make gay marriage illegal. You don't get that. You don't get the Iraq War. You don't get all of the lying involved, going completely unpunished. You don't get the financial crisis and the deregulation, which started under George H.W. Bush and then happened full scale under fucking Bill Clinton. So without Reagan, you don't get to Trump. Trump is the logical follow-up. And is he the conclusion of Reaganism? I don't know. But he is absolutely dumber Reagan. He's Reagan with more advanced senility at an earlier period in his tenure, and way dumber people stage managing him.
Yeah, this is your logical conclusion. And with luck, I feel like a lot of QAnon people there really weren't that many protests. Like all the protests that everybody thought was going to happen, there was a lot of people sitting and waiting and saying, oh, well, maybe this is the last chance, this is the last opportunity. And then they found that their God King was actually just a narcissistic piece of shit. Who didn't give a fuck about them, who threw everybody under the bus. He even threw Giuliani under the bus, man. Like, the man has no fucking loyalty. And, like, in a way, you feel like, I feel a little, like, just a touch of just, like, that kind of sucks for you guys. I mean, because let's be honest, that was a literal psyop. Like, the army wishes it could fucking brainwash 75 million people that easily, with a couple of flyers dropped out of a C-130 or something. But I'm hoping that, at least some conservatives like pull themselves back off the crazy train now that like Trump's not there to put it out there anymore. Like, when you cut off like the flow of bad information like this, when you say no, these things aren't going to be allowed on our platforms. When you deplatform these things, what happened to Richard Spencer? What happened to Milo Yiannopoulos? You deplatformed them and they fucked off. The only person you have left is Laura Loomer because she's just got like insane posting energy and will never stop posting and will be posting until she dies. Like, even if it means, handcuffing herself.
She's banned, but she ran for Congress on a Restore My Twitter account platform and she lost.
Yeah, she famously handcuffed herself to Twitter HQ with a megaphone and just like annoyed people in the immediate area, and that's about it. So, hopefully deplatforming, maybe a little bit of the crazy is going to go away, but like, goddamn, man, there's so much Pandora's box that's been fucking opened here of insanity. And hopefully the Q spell is broken now that everybody kind of that some people realize that Trump was a huge dipshit and a huge piece of shit and was lying to them the entire time. There are definitely going to be people who will not, and who are going to dig their feet in and hold on for dear life. But man, like, for the rest of them, it's just like, can you guys just go back to your jobs or something? Just put on a mask and fuck off now, because we're done with it.
One of the things that I think it was worth bearing in mind too is just like the QAnon thing strikes me as, well, it's sort of, how do you put this? The QAnon thing emerged, to my eyes, as a way for people to explain why Trump winning didn't magically and immediately bring about all of the greatness that they were promised.
Right.
Trump couldn't achieve it solely because he was being blocked by Hillary Clinton and the deep state, and they were going to get rid of them through this, the plan and the storm and everything. But it was completely imaginary, and now these people are basically like left with nothing, and some of them are going to come back from it. Many of them are not. And I mean, if you look on that Reddit thread about QAnon casualties and people talking about all of their family members they've had to cut off because they've gone insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, and it's not just in America. It's in fucking Canada. It's here in the UK. Like,
Japan?
Yeah, man. Fucking wild shit. And so, I mean, in a way, the thing about it is you said you hope some conservatives will pull back from the crazy. I don't think they will. And the reason I don't think they will is that conservatives, perhaps more so than liberals, are well aware of who butters their bread and what side it's buttered on. And the smart ones among them are able to sort of lick their finger and detect which way things are shifting and kind of like roll with that. The dumb ones just have enough fucking, they at least can see the amount of money they get and know how to take orders. The point being, though, that like the Mercers, et cetera, like they're not going to stop funding the crazy. And, Dinesh D'Souza, those kinds of people, they're still going to be around. Simon and Schuster having an imprint to fucking publish their crazy books, like that's not going to go away. The only thing is that I do think what happened, 2 weeks and a day ago shocked a lot of people and is probably going to have, at least for a period of time, enough of a like shaking people out of their lull kind of effect that I think you will see temporarily, not permanently, but temporarily, a little bit less credulity on the part of the normal people. Like, what about the dang deficit? Oh, can't we just meet in the middle? Like seeing that in person, seeing, like basically a guy who owns a plumbing business in Scranton basically screaming about heads on pikes, like seeing that shit, I think made some people realize that you cannot compromise.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that we will eventually go back to business as usual, the same stupidity that we had under Clinton and under Bush and under Obama, but particularly. It does seem like his teams are being a little bit smarter about like, hey, maybe let's not give away 2/3 of the loaf in the first round of negotiations. I don't know. But again, what I am saying is that I think that if there is any lasting effect of what happened 2 weeks ago, it's that I think it made people realize, it made it harder to deny just how fucking nuts that whole conservative influence sphere is. And I hope that people are less taken in by stupid appeals towards healing the country. Like, that's not something you can heal. It's something you have to suppress.
You have to excise. You need to cut out.
Like at a certain point, we didn't crush it after the Civil War enough, and that's why we still have this fucking problem. If we had fucking eliminated all of it then, we wouldn't have this problem today. Like white revanchism, insane chauvinism, the idea that people who aren't the right race and class and landowning status and gender don't deserve any rights whatsoever. Like that is baked into reactionary sentiment. Like it's not right-wing liberalism. It's full on, either you're of the elect or you're not. And like, I do think that at this point, it's American conservatism and that reactionary tendency are indistinguishable. You can't compromise with that shit. And I mean, Obama tried, and as soon as they got power, they basically went out of their way to make it almost impossible for minorities to vote.
Yep.
And look what happened. So fucking be honest with yourselves.
Yep. And there's a lot of quiet part out loud. A lot of, if we make DC and Puerto Rico states, then Republicans will never win again. It's like, you guys, you talk about how like affirmative action is unfair, yet you want affirmative action for your own fucking politics because nobody likes you except for other assholes like you. So, it's this is a reckoning, and you want to believe that hopefully the country will that it won't fall into the same bullshit that it always does. But I don't. I feel like it's gonna just like Carter got Carter pardoned. Nixon,
No. Ford pardoned.
I don't know, man. I wasn't born back then. Anyway, Nixon got fucking pardoned. Fuck that guy. And I just like, I'm holding my breath for it. I'm waiting for Biden to say like, well, we need to do unity, because as soon as there's a unity, other than like, look, I'll work with Republicans on doing stuff, but as soon as there's I'm going to absolve them of everything that they did for the last 4 years. That's all. We're just back on the same track. We're back on the same direction. And like, there needs to be punishment. There needs to be there are consequences for your actions here. And I think that's where we gotta leave that one, because I gotta get to work. But fuck, man, I don't know. Like, it's nice. It's nice to not be under Trump for a minute. And Biden's not great, and everybody who is still worried about Biden has every right to be worried about Biden. Everybody who is happy that Trump is gone has every right to be happy that Trump is gone. But goddamn, like it does for a minute feel like that load of stress. Like I just got like 2 years of my life back, because it's not just constantly staring at a wall and being scared. I'm glad to be back to things being normally bad instead of horrifyingly bad.
I mean, I'm glad they won't be appointing people to lifetime federal judgeships because, you know, they passed a fucking Scantron test about Ayn Rand books and have never been in a courtroom. I'm glad the president won't be telling people to inject bleach. I'm glad there are some things about, like, I hope they can fix the postal service, but, like, the fact of the matter is it's going to be almost impossible to remove Louis DeJoy unless they fucking indict him. I hope that things get better, even if it's on a small scale, the government functions kind of way. I want to be surprised. I want to be taken aback by how well Biden performs. I do. I mean, he's not my guy. It's not who I wanted. We need way more, bold action. I think he's the wrong man for the moment. But the fact of the matter is,
he's getting progressive people in there. It's better than it. This is better than what it has been. And while incrementalism isn't ideal, it's what you got right now. So I guess
it's better than Trump. Okay, I'm sanguine about it. It's better than Trump. That's all. Like, it's better than Trump. If they manage to pull something better, even better, then great. I don't have any high hopes. I'm going to keep the pressure on as best I can from afar, since I'm a fucking loser who lives in England, where things will only get worse. But it's better than Trump, but it still sucks. But that's the world. That is the circumstance of the times we are condemned to live in.
All right, and so for your bonus episode, I did an interview with David Parsons, who is a co-host of Nostalgia Trap, who wrote a book called Dangerous Grounds. If you have not been, if you're not, on our YouTube, I've been doing readings from various GI newsletters at least once a week. I'm trying to do a little bit more, but these underground anti-war, very socialist, very progressive politic magazines that were put out all during the Vietnam War by veterans and by people who were opposing the draft and everything. So David wrote a really great book called Dangerous Grounds. So he and I talked about that. It seemed like it wasn't just we need to get rid of the war. I mean, that's definitely the current goal, but also it feels like they were thinking more long term.
Yeah, and also it kind of tells you a little bit of where so much of the energy was coming from in the 1960s in terms of radicals and in terms of people on the left, because and especially young people on the left, because the civil rights movement is what got so many both white and black young people into political action and political activism, or even just knowing about politics. So it makes sense that in these newspapers, these underground newspapers you're talking about, which were tens of thousands of these were produced throughout the era, and it really demonstrates how quickly the politics evolved and how diverse the politics were, because you had straight Marxist, socialist, Leninists that had papers, but you also had papers that were much more psychedelic. And you had papers that were, of course, coming out of black liberation, that people that were within the American military, black men, young men who were writing these types of papers too. So it's a wide range of concerns, and the war, Vietnam War, basically serves as a sort of container for everything that's wrong in American society. So when you look at these newspapers, you get to see this on the ground sort of, grunt's eye view of what's happening in America, what the terms are. But you're absolutely right. The draft is what is important here, because by 1967, the war was really unpopular. And yet you had, hundreds of thousands of young men being drafted in the military unwillingly, and a culture that was increasingly, I don't want to say the counterculture and the Beatles were all just an anti-war force, but that sort of stuff, did have an effect on in popular culture and on people's concerns. So, by the time you get to 1967 and 68, you've got a U.S. Army, especially. Army is where 95% of the draftees are going. That's just filled with a lot of young people who aren't necessarily down with the Vietnam War. And it's people outside of the military, like Fred Gardner, who's the guy that started the GI coffee houses, who notices that and says, I think there's a whole bunch of young people in the Army that don't want to be there. And what if we could somehow organize them? So that's part of what's going on there.
Yeah, the leftist buzzword of organize,
right?
But that he did. So So tell us about the beginnings of this, and then how it kind of became the network of coffee houses that it was.
Well, like I said, Fred Gardner is the guy that I credit with starting the coffee house or coming up with the idea of coffee houses. And it's important to understand. I think maybe young people don't understand as much that coffee house culture had a particular kind of political and social kind of meaning at the time. There was an idea that coffee houses were places, before Starbucks became like the prototypical corporate, a coffee house. There were places like, especially in San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York, where there was sort of this beatnik thing from the 50s rising up into the 60s, being a coffee house as a sort of place that centers political action and organization. So Fred Gardner, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say they're great because they're places that, it's like right now, I mean, because of COVID, obviously you don't go anywhere, but where do you go to hang out with people? Where do you go to meet people who think like you? And, I hung out at coffee houses when I was a teenager because I couldn't hang out at bars, but eventually you do notice that culture was there even in the 90s when I was wasting my time at those places. But
you remember the bulletin boards, right? Like, like a 90s. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, this is part of maybe why, in thinking about why I might have been interested in this. I mean, I was young in the 90s, but I remember coffee houses and the sort of culture. I'm thinking about Jewel and like the folk music thing, because folk music and the intersection of kind of culture and politics was what coffee houses were all about. And as you entered into the 1960s, that took on a much more specific kind of radicalism. So, Fred Gardner, as someone who had been in the U.S. Army as a reservist, he felt that that the cities and towns outside American military bases were places that were awful in terms of offering options for young people to hang out in. And his idea was, what if we went to these towns and opened up coffee houses that had a kind of like counterculture vibe to them, Bob Dylan posters and that sort of thing, and kind of bring people in from the U.S. military that might be like, enjoying their off-base time, and it might put active duty American GIs in contact with the anti-war movement. So his idea was organization in some ways, but it was also like he wanted to create a place that was a sort of like a refuge for GIs that were stuck in these awful towns.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're not in the military, never spent any time in the military, the towns that are right side out of bases are generally gross. In their own ways. They're small town. Like a military base is usually in the middle of nowhere because land's cheap and you can shoot guns and nobody's going to complain about it. So the base, the towns that spring up, or the towns that like really get groundswells during this time, are very pro-military because the military is pumping. Not only like is there local contractors are getting building and cleaning and jobs on the post, but the soldiers who rotate in, they want to go drink, they want to go out to eat, they want to go do things. So and especially during Vietnam, you've got, hey, we're going to build up this base and we're going to run 100,000 GIs through it every month, and I don't know if that's what the actual numbers are, but that's basically, it's just money symbols, money signs going up. So when you're doing this, what you're saying, this is not friendly grounds for anybody. This is not a friendly. This is not a like, oh, everybody, we're just going to open up a shop here and it's going to be a little boutique place where you can come and read poetry and it's going to be fine. Which like now that's like, well, it's whatever. But back then it's a direct threat, I guess.
Yeah. And the sort of towns that you're talking about, those. I come from a town like that. I come from a town, Ventura, California, which has Point Mugu Naval Base near it, and Port Hueneme surrounds that place. And the descriptions that I read when I was doing research for this book of all these towns were very familiar to me in terms of that kind of downtown strip of like, I don't know, dive bars and tattoo places and sort of like
pawn shops.
Yeah,
and a place to get money. Payday loan places.
Yeah, right. Depressing businesses. Yep. So, where I mean, that's part of the book is sort of. I had to sort of understand that despite the fact that that exists, not every base was exactly the same in terms of what the where it was located, what kind of people were around, and that sort of thing. Like Fort Jackson, which is where the in Columbia, South Carolina, which is where the first Fred Gardner started the first GI coffee house, the UFO coffee house. That Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina, you're talking about a city that's a little bit larger than somewhere like Killeen, Texas, where Fort Hood is, and the Oleo Strut. And so a lot of the book is sort of concerned with sort of delineating the differences between those places. Like Columbia, South Carolina is a place like you sort of made reference to there that has a deep connection to the American military machine in every political and cultural way, and economic way, and a town that has a long history of that. Whereas Killeen, Texas is a tiny place, especially in the late 1960s. It doesn't have a university. It's not a place that has any sense of like a kind of cosmopolitan downtown. So a lot of the sort of histories of these coffee houses are going to be determined by how remote they are. Whereas, certain like the Mountain Home Air Force Base, the Mountain Home Coffee House in the Air Force Base in Idaho, that place was in the middle of nowhere, but that place was burned down after 6 months of being operated. Like, in other words, like it was very difficult for these coffee houses to open, and more difficult depending on where they were.
I noticed when I was reading stuff, there's a Marine Corps zine that's called Semper Fi that was printed in Japan and out of the Hobbit House, but that place seemed to like their zine went until 1984. So I don't know how long the Hobbit House managed to stay open, but it kind of felt like after the war, there's no reason for the coffee houses to keep going, but. Maybe some of them just kind of had some steam and kept running with it.
Yeah, it's weird because the Marines, it was harder to organize Marines, in part because Marines weren't drafted in the same way, right? And there's this sort of like different level of engagement with the American military project when you're a U.S. Marine as opposed to a draftee in the Army. So, finding anti-war Marines was a lot more rare than finding people in the U.S. Army who were willing to participate in anti-war actions. But yeah, all of that is really important.
As always, thank you for listening. You can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the podcast at Hell of a Way. We are all over and everywhere. If you ever feel like maybe you're a person that we might want to talk to, you should hit us up, DM me. I'm always happy to bring people on to, even if it's just to talk Army shit, or just talk some basic politics stuff. So. Other than that, though, we really appreciate you guys being listeners. We appreciate whatever support you give us, whether it be financial or just telling other people about us and getting the word out. As podcast, it's been 4 years. We survived the Trump administration. Like the whole reason that this podcast was created was for that. But I think it's kind of gone beyond that at this point. So really, really excited. New chapter. New year. New year, new us, man.
Things are going great for us. Less great for my other podcast, Mueller, She Wrote. But you know what?
Mueller, She Wrote still has a better Patreon income than we do. So
haters fucking hate it. All right, everyone. Have a great week. We will talk to you soon.
Take care.
Zoom, zoom.